called the Exodus. As a small child, I was reserved, quiet, a mama's boy, shy and compassionate. I've always desired peace, but how often the things I desire don't match the things I receive. Like King David said, "Woe is me that I sojourn in the Shek, that I dwell in the tents of Kedar. My soul had long dwelt with him that hated peace. I am for peace. But when I speak, they are for war. For a long time I returned their war for war, pound for pound, round for round, fire for fire. I knew no other way. At home, we solved conflicts with violence. Arguments resulted in fists and shouts of silence. My siblings and I brought aside, fight, they'd say. Whoever was bested that day first embarrassed in front of our parents, who would then grab the torch, whooped while the others watched, laughed, stood. Nowadays, I don't blame anyone, but too often, to my shame, I was the one, last born at the time. Often I paid for someone else's crimes. By and by, I learned not to cry. I held the anger inside. I hoped to quench it, but it would not subside. That rage took center stage whenever I would fight. I dealt with it the larger part of my life. I learned through pain to sit in spite. See, I hate to lose. I started to become strategic with how I would let loose. If you crossed me, you better watch me. I took my time to pick the revenge I'd choose. I learned to manipulate, to create a ruse. I'd frame you. The best part was they never knew. I'd make the offenders fight against themselves. If it were just one, I'd get them to put them in a situation to get a beating, knowing how to put them at odds with my parents. I'd commit a crime and plant the evidence to make it apparent they had done it, indeed, just like I had planned it. If I was too angry to do these things, filled with a spirit of rage, I'd throw whatever I could find. Silverware, a toy truck too. I'd grab a weapon to hopefully end you. I'd run to the kitchen, come back with a knife like surprise, chase you around, and if I couldn't pin you down, I'd throw the knife at you. I can still see it moving in slow motion across the room. All this from a child who was passionate, whose sensitivity turned wild in a toxic environment. Eventually, I decided to try and stay away from arguments. When I moved to boarding school with kids who never experienced anything like I did, I had to protect them from myself, warning them not to poke me or else I didn't fight fair. I tried to reason with myself, but I knew that rage didn't care. If I got there, the anger you had in mind couldn't compare. I'd do things you wouldn't dare. When I was provoked, I tended to crease my eyebrows and stare, imagining the damage I could inflict if I didn't take care. So I fought myself. I'd say to myself, anger is a useless emotion, a deadly potion. They play with that which they have no notion. I eventually turned in on myself, cut off from the rest, fell into a deep depression, considering life and all its lessons, questioning everything, and all seemed to be trivial things. Like King Solomon, I found vanity consumed humanity. We have no sense of anything, and we have lost our gauge in order to tell the scope of our insanity. I considered my past, the generations that passed. One is born, another comes. Their curses and patterns always seem to outlast them. I'd become the things I hated the most. Things I'd hidden were now impossible not to show, and somehow in my pursuit of truth, I found myself in more confusion. Now I realize that had I truly been searching for truth, I would have found a person, but actually, I was pursuing knowledge that was not grounded, not anchored in reason, not understanding spiritual times or seasons, signs, and that Lady Wisdom's teachings. She came to me at a young age. She battled that rage, but I chose a cage, and there I stayed. For years, I was there, dejected, despondent, yet equally heartbroken to the things around me, always moved but never responding. I quenched my spirit to the point where if it attempted to speak, I could barely hear it. We no longer know. I remember in school learning about the Great Depression. We speak about these things rarely, barely, and I fear we have not learned the lesson. We no longer know the dark depths of recession. We prefer those who speak kind words than practical, beneficial policy. Renting our clothes when those we've elected damage our economy. Homes forecloses, rent spike, not realizing they plan to make everyone a borrower with nothing to own. We must be the most intellectually dishonest populace in history, lacking that inner voice of truth, that instinct, that gut feeling, with eyes that don't see, ears that don't hear.